Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on attribution management and bidding in a multi-device world. I'm your host, Dan Beavener with Simplilearn, and this webinar is all about the amazing aspects of attribution management, which may be unfamiliar to some people, but because it's a new and fairly recent development, attribution management is really getting the attention of pay-per-click experts. It offers its potential to shed a clear insight on the precise degree of influence that each marketing touchpoint has on the eventual conversion. Attribution management and bidding techniques can help you identify authentic and richly rewarding marketing and advertising channels and maximize ROI. So today, Brad Geddes, who's the author and world-renowned AdWords expert, is here to share some of the best-kept practices and secrets about attribution management, including the various models and even how to automate your bidding based upon attribution. I'd like to introduce you to Brad Geddes. Brad is our guest today. He's the author of Advanced Google AdWords. He's the co-founder of AdAlysis, an automatic ad testing and pay-per-click recommendation platform. And Brad frequently writes columns for Search Engine Land, co-moderates the AdWords forum for Webmaster World, and he has keynoted and spoken at more than 85 conferences and has led more than 60 AdWords seminars. Plus, he's a course advisor for the digital marketing curriculum here at Simplilearn, and I'm really proud to welcome Brad. Brad, how are you?
Good, good. Thank you, Dan.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Always check the audio first. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yes. We can hear you just fine. Thank you very much.
Excellent, excellent. So, hello, everyone. So today we're going to talk about, attribution management and what that means from a channel standpoint and a bidding standpoint. So we're going to go through what is attribution and why should you care about this, the attribution models, and then how to use them, how to pick a model from a bidding standpoint, and then even how to import that model into AdWords so you can automate your bidding. Now, the reason we talk about this is research that Microsoft did a couple of years ago on one person buying one camera. And so what happened, right, is someone searched, didn't click. They searched later, they clicked. They searched again on a different device, they clicked. They went back to a different device, clicked a couple more times, and finally bought. So the question here, right, is what are all these clicks worth? Do you want to bid on every one of these clicks? Do you only want to be on a couple of them? And so this is where attribution starts to come into play. That says, okay, that first click was very valuable, the middle one's not so much, the other one's super valuable. Right? And how do you want to evaluate when a user comes to your site multiple times from a channel and a bid standpoint, within one conversion process? So when we think about why does attribution matter? Well, first, it's understanding how to bid, right? When you think about you've got all these different keywords and audiences and display and multiple channels, attribution says this is really what this visit's worth to me in this path. It lets you understand how each channel contributes to your final sales. It helps you determine channel budgets, or if you should remove a channel. Determines the value of awareness versus closing. Right? How did someone become aware of you? What's the journey look like? What made them finally become a customer? It looks to see how you should treat generic versus brand terms. And it really lets you, market wisely. Use your money the best option possible. Now, we're going to walk through the channels, but unfortunately, when we look at most companies, and we say, how are you picking attribution? It's almost always the CMO picks an option, the Chief Marketing Officer. And it's often not an option based on data. It's based on opinion. The whole highest person's opinion is what you do regardless of what the data says. And so what we really want to do is shed some light on the various models so that you're making informed decisions about how you pick a model. So when you look at your analytics, and this is a company where their first path link, someone clicks just once and goes to their site, it's half their conversions, right? Well, okay, so we say, wow, half our conversions in one click, that's pretty good, we're doing really well. Well, it's only half the conversions, but it's 21% of the revenue. That's it. If someone comes 12 times or more to this particular site, that only makes up 10% of their conversions, but it does make up 33% of their revenue. And so this is why we need to think about this, is when you've got these sort of inverse relationships, the more someone visits, the higher their checkout amount is. Right? It says it's not just about last click. Right? In a last click environment, which means we give all the credit to the last entrance to the website, we would be bidding the most for those one path link interactions, that 50% of conversions, which is only 1/5 of revenue. Or an attribution lets us start divvying up the credit because that 12 touch point user makes up so much percentage of revenue. And so what often happens, right, is when you start looking at various models, say, okay, if we look at paid search by last interaction, we have a $16 CPA. If you look by first interaction, we have $11 CPA. If we look by position base, we have a $13 CPA. And so this is just data. This doesn't tell you how to interpret the data or use it. It's useful from a channel comparison standpoint. But really we want to look at, why does last click really matter? Why does first interaction matter, and why is the data so differently? And then what's position-based? So when we think about last click interaction means someone clicked on your link and then converted. Everything they did previous to that is not counted in last click. And so last click gives 100% of the conversion value to the last entrance to website. So while in a long journey, it may not be a good bid method, what this does tell you is what closes the sale. What's that final interaction point that gets someone to close? Now, there's a lot you can, even if you use an attribution model, which we're going to go through, there's a lot you can pull from this, because these touch points are the ones that you want to be hard selling on. Right? If you think of a call to action of like learn more versus buy today. Well, learn more is not that useful if they're at that last interaction touch point, right? You want to do the call for your free assessment, right? You want that harder call to action that says it's time for you to, actually do something now and become a customer. And so when we even think about how does our marketing message change throughout the funnel, right? We have awareness, right? Hey, we exist. We've got that consideration phase, people are learning, and then we have buy, right? This tells you what happens in that buy phase. So even if you don't bid by last click, it's a good evaluation model to see what's closing customers, because you want to make sure that the ads in this part of the funnel are much harder sales. Now, the one issue you run into with Google Analytics is Google Analytics looks at what is the last entrance to website before someone converted. So the problem you end up a lot of times is that you're missing tracking somewhere, or users got something stripped out, and you see a lot of direct in your conversion. So what last non-direct does is it says direct means we either didn't track them or they typed in our URL directly, right? And then they finally bought. So what last non-direct does is say, if we removed the last direct touch point and we went up to the previous touch point that has a channel associated to it, what is that channel? So this is very similar to last click, except this removes the direct part. And so if you are a company focused on direct sales, you send out a lot of mail flyers and say, you read this, and you come to our site and you convert, right? That is where last click or last non-direct click is useful from a bid standpoint when you are only direct response focused. Now, the opposite of this is first interaction. A first interaction says, what's the first time we had a brand touch point with this user who then later converted. So what you'll often see in really large enterprise companies is they value first touch dramatically. This is the opening of the conversation. This is the awareness generating touch point. So if you're really focused on generating more awareness and getting more people into your funnel, that's where first touch point, first interaction is very useful. So now when we think about our marketing messages, what our ads look like, right? This is not a hard sale piece. This is now the welcome to our company. Here's all the ways we can help you out. This is the learn more touch point. Watch a video touch point, right? Not the hard sale. And so it's useful to look at your first interactions and say, how are they finding about us? What are they learning about our company? Let's make sure that the ads we're putting there aren't hard sales that turn people off, but they're welcoming someone to come to our site and learn more about our offers. Next, we have linear. So linear says if someone comes to our site 4, 5, 6 times before they convert, let's value every touch point the exact same. Now, from a bid standpoint, that's not useful, right? From a bid standpoint, the first and last are by far the most important touch points, right? How they hear about you, what closed them. Where linear is really useful is saying, is this channel even contributing to pushing people forward? So for instance, for our company, we started a new channel about 6 weeks ago. And so yesterday, right, we'd only spent now $5,000 or $6,000 on a channel, and we're looking to say, how is this done? Because from a direct standpoint, it was awful, right? It was like, we should get rid of this money. But when we looked at linear, we saw about 10% of all our new customers in the last about 3 weeks, let's ramp up, had actually touched this touch point. Right now, it's only 3 weeks of data, it's still early, so we say, well, we're not going to remove it yet because it appears, early data says, this touch point is moving people forward in their overall touch points becoming a customer. So we should make a note in our project management system that says, let's check back in on this channel in 3 or 4 more weeks and see, is it truly pushing people forward, or is that just sort of like an anomaly of early data? So when you're thinking, should we even use a channel? Is this channel useful? Should we get rid of the channel? Linear is a really good evaluation method because it'll show you if that touch point has even contributed to the users finally converting. Then we have time decay. Time decay is one where it's focused towards what closes the sale, except it values most recent interactions to closing more than first interactions. So we work with a company who believes their direct response. They believe, hey, we advertise, people buy, we only care about direct response, we're direct response, that's it. Except when we look at analytics, we see that their average customer is 3.5 touch points before they convert. So they want to be direct response. They're not actually direct response. And so the compromise then is to use sort of a time decay method that says the closer someone was to converting, we're going to value that more. But okay, we get some people do come 2 or 3 times, so let's value that a little bit less, but focus more on what's really closing those sales in the end. And then we have the one that says position-based. We value first touch point and last touch point the most. Right? How do they find us? How do they hear about us? What closed them? Those are the two that we're really going to value the absolute most. And then we're going to take the rest of the credit. Maybe we give 40% to first touch, 40% to last touch. Take that middle 20%. And we're going to divvy it up among the other touch points in the user journey. So this, for many companies, this is a good model to start with because it values how'd you find us, Right? What's that awareness? Use your first touch point to make sure your ads say, hey, welcome to our company. It values the last touch point a lot. What made you close? But it doesn't forget about the middle journey. Now, the downside of a position-based is, let's say your average conversion is 5 touch points. And so maybe you look and say, okay, we're going to give 30% of our credits to the first touch point, 30% to the last touch point, right? So that's 60% of credit. Means we have 40% left. And we've got 3 in the middle. So we're going to value each one, about 13%. For some companies, that lowers the bids so much if it's a bidding standpoint that they disappear completely from results in the middle of the journey. And so that is the one downside of position-based, is that it may undervalue your middle one so much you disappear and you lose your sort of middle. And you need to look at what that model is. And so regardless of the model you pick, what you want to do is benchmark, here's how we are today. Then we want to put a model in place. We'll say, okay, after 3 weeks, 4 weeks, how do we do with the model in place? Do we get more conversions, right? Number one, do we get more revenue? Are we looking at our customer base and saying, okay, we are now touching how they're dealing with us appropriately through each stage of the overall funnel? Then you can customize these, right? So when we look at something like position-based, it often starts with 40% first, 40% second, 20% for the middle. And so the downside of that, right, is the lower bids. So what we often use is some simple rules. It says if our average clicks to conversion, it's less than 4.5, then we use whatever the default bid settings are. If it's longer than that, right, now we need to give some more credit to that middle interaction because there are so many middle interactions. So in that case, you can go in and you can actually start to change the percentages you're allocating to everything. Now, finally, when we think about attribution, another important piece of this is look-back window. Right? Look-back window says how far back in time are we evaluating this data? So by default, you generally see 30 days. Now, 30 days may be fine in sort of like a retail B2C interaction. Often in B2B, you end up with conversion processes which are 35, 45, 60 days, and potentially years. So in cases like that, you often want to increase your look-back window so that you're valuing more touch points. But if the average person comes to you 5 times over 3 months, and you only look at last 30 days of data, you've probably cut out like 2, 3, 4 of those touch points, which is how they found you and what pushed them forward. So just as important as what model you use is also your look back window. How much time are you using, right? Looking back and aggregating your data. So last year, Google came out with a data-driven attribution system. And so with data-driven, it says, here's all the touch points, here's all the pathways. We're going to use machine learning to figure out our percentages. Now, the good side of data-driven attribution, right, is if you have a lot of conversions. You have a lot of sort of wandering pathways, right? Users don't go through a nice, neat pathway system. Everyone's a little different in how they convert. They have different touch points. And so data-driven starts to look at, based on how they found you, based upon how they closed, what is the value of those touch points in the middle, right? And then can aggregate it and push it out. Now, you need a lot of data for this to work well. By default, data-driven attribution, often called DDA, you'll hear it said, uses linear because it's the flat model to start with. And so if you go down a data-driven route with few conversions, you're really just bidding on a linear method, right? And so the downside is without a lot of data, you're better off picking your own model. if you have a lot of data and you feel very strongly about a model, feel very strongly about position-based, then just put position-based in. If you don't feel strongly and you have a lot of data, you just want to see how it works, then DDA can be very, very useful to get into. Now, the other thing we often want to look at is what's the assisting value of channels, of those touch points. And so this is where we often see is people make mistakes when they ignore assisted values. So this was a company, and they were doing fairly well on paid search. And when they looked at, here's our keywords with conversions, and here's our keywords without conversions, and then here's our spend. They thought, wow, right? Our keywords without conversions is most of our spend. It's most of our actual keywords. We should just delete this. This is, by everyone's standards, right? This is wasted spend. So we shouldn't actually, use these keywords any longer. So, based on the recommendation from their agency, they went and they selected, I think, the last 12 months and said, if this keyword doesn't have a conversion last 12 months, we're pausing it. And so they said, we're going to save a whole lot of money by doing this. And month one was before they did a pause. They had 200-something conversions. And then they went to a little under 100. And then they went to 55, and they said, we did something really, really bad. So we need to go and put those back and do a different type of evaluation on our data because we just sort of shot ourselves in the foot by what we made following best practices here. And so when they split it up and said, here's keywords without conversions but have assists, right? What was happening was users were searching for generic-based words. This was actually a flower nursery. So people would search for how to plant roses, tending to tulips, pretty rose gardens. And they were going to this website and saying, wow, those are really pretty pictures. And they would think about it, and they'd walk outside and look at where they may plant a garden. And they remember the website, so they would go search for the brand, click buy. So what had happened is it was like 98% of their conversions were only on brand terms. And so what happened, as soon as they deleted all those generic words, no one found their site to see their pretty pictures and learn their advice, so then they didn't know the brand to search for. And so when you have that type of query that goes, how to raise roses versus best weather for planting rose bulbs versus the brand name, and that was a very traditional funnel for them, right? They needed those other words in place so people heard about them, right? That's that in their case, that generic word was that assist value, was that awareness factor. And so when we think about things like, hey, let's bid based on conversion values. Well, the question is, what's a conversion value? Right? There's a word that leads to 100 conversions, but doesn't have any itself. If its conversion value is 0, then yeah, on a bid system, you should bid 0. But when you use attribution models, it puts fractional conversions in your paid search account. You'll see this keyword has 0.35 conversions, 9.25 conversions, and it brings that fractional value into AdWords. And so then when you set your bids based on your target CPA, your target revenue, you're actually bidding by that assisted values. Now, another good place to look at your attribution data is when channels overlap. And the main reason why is consistency in feel and messaging. So we'll often see this as a big holiday mistake we see a lot of companies make, is they've got their website and it's blue and green, and it's Christmas time, and so they decide, hey, we're going to send out these holiday themed emails that are red and white, and we're going to make a landing page which is red and white, and someone who might have been to their site several times, right, knows their look and feel, goes to this holiday page and they're like, who are they? I don't know this company, because that initial feel, that same brand isn't there. And so if you think about, here's our display ads, and here's our organic listings, and potentially here is even television, so forth. If your channels do not overlap at all, you can have fun with what your pages look like and your design and so forth. If you have huge overlap, then you need to be consistent in that messaging. You need to be consistent in the imagery, right? We'll see companies who, go to paid search like, we're paying for it. We want to make sure we get a conversion. Let's give them 10% off, and they put 10% off in every one of their paid search ads. And then their emails, they've been a customer. We have their email. Let's just send a reminder to log in and buy something, right? And now they have a mismatch, and that user searches, they see a discount. If they see an email, they don't, right? And now you suddenly have a brand mismatch. And this is why a lot of companies have brand guidelines, imagery guidelines, color palette guidelines. It's to make sure that users have a consistent, right, experience with the accompany across channels. So the main reason to look at overlap, right, is how do users go through different channels before they buy? Because if we have different experiences by channel, we could confuse users, right? If we don't, then we could do whatever we want to. Now, attribution, it does take work, right? You have to go in and you have to look and say, what model do we want? We need to evaluate the model. We need to look at overlaps by channel. We need to look at assisting conversion values. So it does add some work to your plate. So the question is, does it matter, right? So this company, they are direct response. 90% of their conversions, 90% of their revenue is one touch. It is that same day, this day someone finds them, is the day they convert. And when we look at, okay, what if it takes longer? What if it takes 2 or 3 different times, or they come back a week later? It is completely linear in the percentage of conversions and percentage of conversion value. So the customers don't get, better or spend more or spend less based on day lags. They're just a direct response company. So if your attribution looks like this, you may not really worry about attribution that much. When your attribution looks like this, right, it's U-shaped. The more someone comes back to your company, the more value they are worth. Now, attribution is very essential, because that user who comes to your site 4, 5, 6 times is worth a lot more than the user who comes once or twice, right? So the more they do research, the bigger their purchase value is, right? That's a huge learning experience to take away. It's not just about touch point, get them in, have them buy something. It's about the education of the users, so that they're buying like the most expensive products, or the product that really fits them, and they start building things together in their final conversion process. So if we jump over to AdWords, right, assuming you've got your Google Analytics account linked to your AdWords account, when you go into your conversion tracking and you hit the edit button, you have the option to pick an attribution model. So by default, it's last click. That is the default model that is used, right? It's the last touch point before they bought something. But you could choose data-driven. You could choose first click. You can choose time decay or position-based. And so when you add an attribution model like this into your conversion tracking, that's where you get fractional conversions out of AdWords. About 1.5 years ago or so, all the conversion columns went from 1 to 1.00, right? You had the decimal point in those 2 other fractional numbers. And most companies just see 00 and wonder, why did Google add 0.00 across all of my conversion data? It's because if you're using linear, and someone comes to you 4 times and they buy once, each of those touch points is now not going to say 1, or 3 say 0 and 1 say 1. All will be 0.25. If you're using position-based, you'll see, 0.4, 0.2, 0.2, 0.4. And so this is why Google made the change to show fractions in conversion columns, because if you go into your conversion tracking and you're using Google Analytics conversion tracking and you're pushing in the attribution data, you can now do fractional conversions. So now your account will have fractional data in it. So this also means then, if you choose target CPA bidding, you do ROAS-based bidding, where you let Google set the bids for you. If you're doing attribution modeling with fractional conversions in the account, then you've actually automated the attribution bidding for the account. And so if it's a lot of work to do all of this, then essentially it's go to Analytics, pick an attribution, put it in your AdWords conversion tracker, turn on CPA bidding or ROAS bidding. You're now bidding by attribution models. The question is, when you see these models, which one do you want to use based on your company type? And data-driven, it's always there. If you don't have enough data, you won't see it. The other issue sometimes running with data-driven is that if you've got a bunch of campaigns, it's not very good at looking at users cross campaigns. So that's sort of the other downside you sometimes get into with it if you don't have a lot of conversions. If you have a whole lot, not a problem at all. So the other thing we want to look at attribution for is, how do different devices compare? So if we just look at attribution modeling and we say, how does AdWords do, or how does Facebook do, how does Twitter do, right? That's going to show us how users do across all devices. What we often see, especially in business to businesses, B2B marketing, is that mobile's horrible, right? Occasionally, there's exceptions, right? We'll occasionally see B2B companies that mobile's amazing. Most companies, mobile's horrible. And so if you just go into your analytics and you say, wow, no one clicks on our mobile ads and converts, we should bid mobile way, way down. So what we want to do, right, is say, let's look at our channels and let's segment our channels by devices. Now, once we can see the device options, let's look at our attribution modeling. And let's do things like compare position-based to last click to even linear, right, within our segmentation of channel groupings and devices. So if we see that, hey, paid search on a desktop, most of our conversions are last click. And paid search on a mobile device, most of our conversions are first click, right? What that tells you is that via paid search, they're finding you on mobile, they're converting on desktop. So mobile may be undervalued. Other times you may look at that and say, yep, mobile's horrible for us, right? But when you think about the value of different device types, right, it's not about last click, right? It's about customer journeys. Customers have very wandering journeys. So it's more about saying, how are they interacting with us on this device? And so we could use that data to set our bid modifiers. Right, last year, Google started actually using device bid modifiers even on CPA bidding. They don't use the other modifiers for CPA bidding, but they do use device modifiers in CPA bidding and ROAS bidding. And so by looking at the value of devices, it gives you a better picture of how our mobile device is doing. Because for some people, mobile is where it's all at. Others, it looks terrible. But until you do a channel device comparison by models, that's really when you're going to see, okay, this is how people are really doing this journey with us, right, across channels and devices, so we can actually model that appropriately. Now, the thing is with attribution, we're assuming that users are coming back to our site more than once. So if users are coming once and they convert. We can live off the last click world. It doesn't matter, right? But for most companies, that's not a true statement. So if attribution matters, you're basically saying users are coming to our site more than once before they buy. So that also means audiences matter. If you're doing attribution bidding, you have enough data and care enough about the customer experience, you should have a very good audience strategy in place, right? So with AdWords, you can do audiences based on your website usage, which is often, remarketing or RLSA. You can do it based on customer match, which is based on your CRM data. But, Nielsen did a study. This is about 18 months old now, although this number is only going to continue to grow, is that consumers visit websites at least 6 times on average in the purchase process. So the average checkout takes 6 visits. And I say checkout, this could be a form fill, it could be a phone call, it's all conversions. 6 times on average. So this is why attribution is so important, right? Years ago, all our touch points were mostly offline and we had a couple touch points online. Real simple to do last click, it actually worked in many cases then. But as more and more touch points are online, someone's watching TV, they do a search on their phone, they think about it, the next day they're on their computer, they do another search and look on it. Later it's in the evening and they do a search on their phone, they come back the next day on their computer and actually buy, right? That's 4 touch points. That's not an uncommon experience. 3 of those just contributed to the conversion, didn't actually convert the user, right? The last one did. And so if you need attribution, you need audiences. So, when you think about attribution, this lets you put fractional values on your conversions, right? So to ensure you're valuing these conversions properly across the funnel, then you should be ad testing across the funnel to understand how ads early in the funnel get users engaged and how ads later in the funnel close someone. When you're using attribution, now you've got fractional data. So now you can easily set rules for n-grams, search terms, negative keywords, if a query should be positive or negative, right? So a lot of times, we look at our search query data, we say, hey, we got 20 clicks and no conversions, we're using last click. Well, let's maybe look at bounce rate or something. But if we've got fractional data, now I can even see how those low volume queries are actually contributing, especially when we run into n-grams. Now, the thing is, you must track everything for attribution to work correctly. So this was a site, and they were only initially tracking their website visits. Well, okay, they've got 2,500 conversions, but they actually have 4,000, so they're missing a large percentage. So they added phone call tracking. It jumped up quite a bit. They added their chat tracking, jumped up a little bit more. They added their in-store tracking. Now they can see the full picture of a user. So with attribution modeling, you only get to model based on obviously the data you have. If you have untracked conversions, they're not going to be in your model, right? So you need to look at your site and say, A, how are all the ways someone can convert with us, right? Can they call us? Can they chat? Do we have a chat bot? Can they send a text message? Is it just a form on the website? Can they walk into our store, right? How can they convert? Then make sure you're tracking all the different methods that they can convert. We see all the time people who don't track phone calls make very poor decisions with attribution because often phone calls have a higher conversion rate than a website visit does. And so attribution done properly means you have access to all your conversion data. So if you have leaks, places you're not tracking conversions, right, that is a place that's not being used in your attribution. So, when we examine the models, right, last click, this is often low competition areas, or you're a true market leader and you're just not worried about awareness because everyone knows who you are, and it's conservative growth, right? It seems they know about us already, so it's a very conservative growth model, right? Time decay, a little more aggressive. Linear says value it all the same. Position-based starts moving towards that growth-oriented, right? Maybe you're new to markets, or you have a high competition arena, and so you care a lot about how do they first find us, right? Awareness starts the user down the funnel path in closing. And then finally, if you're really just focused on pure growth, you're brand new to the market, there is no search volume yet, there's not a lot of brand awareness yet, you might work with first click. So we'll often see companies who they're a startup that got funded. They're a first click company. They start getting data. They become a position-based company. Unless they're a true maybe B2C app or something, they rarely get into time decay and last click. They either stay position-based or move to data-driven, right? And so it's a very common entrance. If you're purely direct response and you only care about direct response, then you may start with last click, look at your analytics and say, wow, we want to be direct response. Average visitor is 3 times. Let's use time decay. It's actually going to better show how we interact with users. So the models, it's not that there's a best or worst model, right? They're different. So one step is, how do we evaluate our channels, right? Step 1, channel evaluation. Step 2, ad evaluation, right? Is the ad welcoming users to our site or closing users or moving along the journey, right? Step 3, bid based on the fractional conversions that the touch points bring in. And so those all 3 of those ways you should be using attribution for. So, some things to remember, right? Use attribution models to examine channels for efficiency, right, and contribution. Now, if clicks to conversion is greater than 1.5, you probably want an attribution model for bidding. If clicks to conversion really is 1.1, 1.2, save yourself time. You probably don't need to get an attribution, right? But you have to track everything. Anything not tracked is not going to be taken into account with attribution, right? So DDA, data-driven attribution, right? It's useful if you have a lot of conversions. It's not useful if you don't, because you just get stuck linear. And if you're doing an attribution model, you put it into AdWords, you turn on CPA or OS bidding, you're automating attribution management, right? So, but when you use attribution, analysis is easier because you're taking into account these fractional conversions. Now, this is today, right? What we will see in a software evolution over the next 24 to 36 months is touch points across channels for attribution. Right now, you can see, okay, our users go to AdWords search, AdWords display, Facebook, and they convert off Twitter, right? But you can't see the individual Facebook post they clicked on compared to AdWords search query, right? The data gets very thin very quickly, but we will start to see a rise of what it looks like to take fractional conversions by touch point cross channels into one journey. But that's the future. That's where we're moving towards in the next few years. So keep learning. We love this stuff. I hope that comes across how much we just enjoy paid search and all things you can do. Our next webinar is going to be on the demographics of ad creation and persuasion. How would you serve a different ad with a different imagery to a male versus a female? Right, how to use PPC tools. So I'm a productivity nut, and we'll go through how to use PPC tools and really the art of being productive. And then finally, in June, we'll go through how brands test ads. So getting some large-scale ad testing and how brands, especially when those have a lot of legal considerations, test their ads to make sure they get great results. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Dan for a moment to see if we have any good questions.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Brad. That was really insightful. And you think that this is something that this is a little in the weeds for a lot of direct marketers, but the information you can get from this attribution management is really, really useful, particularly in explaining the big difference between conversions and like just regular analytics. So we have a few questions coming in on this, and here's one from Tanya, and Tanya's asking, are there any specific examples of types of companies or industries that these two models make sense for, position-based versus time decay? Obviously, you guys are leaning towards position-based.
Yeah, so we worked with some like the large weight loss companies, so Nutrisystem or Weight Watchers, so forth, right? All of them want to be last click, but none of them are. And so time decay makes sense because it's a subscription-based business where most people know about them, so it's not so much about awareness, it's how do we get you in our system, right? Where we're like us, AdAlysis, we're a SaaS program. We're still, we've been around for like 5 years, but you know, we've got decent market share. It's not huge. So we care about how people found us and why they found and convert, which is position-based. So it's usually in areas where awareness is still a question. Not everyone knows your name. Then usually position-based makes more sense. When you're a household name, then often you may go more to time decay because everyone already knows who you are, even though they may not know your whole offering. So I can still argue position-based a lot of times over time decay, but that's usually what you end up with from a CMO standpoint.
Okay, well that makes it a lot clearer. So here's another question, and this is coming from Tom. So a client, Tom has a client at a large manufacturing company, and he's working. He says he's working with recently, and he doesn't use any attribution modeling at all. They're all usually briefed by the media agency on impressions and clicks. And as a digital analyst, shall I recommend starting by using last click model? The client is not using Google Analytics fully yet. So what can Tom do to kind of get them on board?
Great question, right? So number one, I use Google Analytics because everyone has access to it. You can do this in Adobe, Core Metrics, right? All the big analytics systems have this type of modeling for it. You have to start somewhere. Last click is a great place to start, right? You can't start by putting in some complicated model with no conversion tracking. So step one is to tell them, we want to know impressions, clicks, conversions, right? And conversions, if you're manufacturing, probably are, you know, either on-site contacts and a lot of phone calls. And then you may even have tertiary ones like catalog downloads or things like that that get sent out to individual salespeople for the different manufacturing companies. Got to start somewhere. Last click is a great place to start. It gets you data, starts things flowing, lets you know what's going on so you can pick something that fits the business better. But step one, track the conversions and just make them, I mean, they should be doing this, right? Giving you actual conversion information.
Great. Well, that's good. That's excellent advice. So that's all the questions we have at this time. So I just want to say thanks again to Brad Geddes for joining us today. A reminder to our audience that you can rewatch and share this webinar instantly right now if you go to YouTube and just search for go to the Simplilearn channel, and you can find it up there pretty easily. And for those of you who registered through WebEx, please keep an eye out for follow-up emails in about a week or so with a written wrap-up of this webinar and also the video and more. Also remember to follow Brad Geddes on Twitter at BGTheory. That's at BG Theory for more information on pay-per-click best practices and more. So if you have any further questions that didn't get addressed during today's presentation, just feel free to tweet us at Simplilearn or comment on YouTube, and we'll get back to you. And of course, for full schedule of all upcoming webinars and events, please head over to our Facebook page and join us for, as Brad mentioned, his previews for his upcoming webinars coming up in the next months or so. So, Brad, thanks again for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Dan, for doing a great job hosting us and moderating.
Great. Well, my pleasure, and see you all next time.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.